Chapter 4. Where are the dead? A little thought will soon make it apparent to any investigator that we live in a world of effect which is the result of invisible causes. Matter and form we see, but the force which molds the matter into form and quickens it is invisible to us. Life cannot be cognized directly by the senses, it is invisible and self-existent, independent of the varied forms we see as its manifestations. Electricity, magnetism, and steam are names given to forces never seen with physical eyes, though, by conforming to certain laws discovered by experiment, we have made them our most valuable servants. We see their manifestations in moving streetcars, in railways and steamships. They light our path at night and carry our message around the globe with a speed that annihilates space. They are at our beck and call at any and all hours, tireless and faithful in the performance of innumerable tasks, yet, as said, we have never seen these, our most faithful and valuable servants. These nature forces are neither blind nor unintelligent as we mistakenly think. There are many classes of them and they work along different avenues of life. Perhaps an illustration will make clear their status in relation to us. Let us suppose a carpenter is making a fence and a dog is standing by watching him. The dog sees both the carpenter and his work, though it does not fully comprehend what he is doing. If the carpenter were invisible to the dog, it would see the fence being slowly built, it would see every nail driven, it would perceive the manifestation but not the cause. And it would then be in the some relation to the carpenter as we are to the nature forces which manifest about us as gravity, electricity, and magnetism. Scientific progress during the past few centuries, but particularly in the last 60 years, science has made giant strides in the investigation of the world in which we live, and the result has been to reveal in all directions a hitherto invisible world. With telescopes of increasing power, the astronomers have been reaching out into space, discovering more and more worlds. With admirable ingenuity they have attached the camera to the telescope, and have thus been able to photograph suns at such enormous distances from us that their rays make no impression on our eyes, and can only be caught by hours of exposure of a sensitized photographic plate. In the direction of the minutely small, the increasing perfection of the microscope has achieved similar results. A world that was hitherto invisible to us has been discovered, containing an exceeding activity of life and marked by a diversity of forms scarcely less complex than the world we behold through our unaided senses. The effort of making such investigations through the eyepiece of a microscope is a severe one, causing intense strain on the eyes, but here also the camera lends its aid to man. With proper mechanical attachments and lightning speed it can make permanent records of microscopic phenomena at the rate of perhaps 70 negatives per second. These may then be magnified and projected upon a screen as moving pictures. They may be seen by hundreds of people at the same time in comfort and ease. We may see how the sap slowly circulates through the veins of a leaf, or watch the way the blood races like a millstream through the semi-transparent veins of a frog's leg. Maggots in cheese appear as large as grey crabs meandering hither and thither in search of prey. A drop of water contains many dark-colored balls which grow and burst, throwing out numerous tiny globes which in their turn expand and fling out offspring. By means of the X-ray, science has been able to invade the innermost recesses of the dense body of the living human, photographing the skeleton and any foreign substance which may have become located there by accident. Thus in many directions a hitherto invisible world has presented itself to the gaze of the persistent investigators. Who shall say the end has been reached, that there are no other worlds in space beyond those now photographed by astronomers, no life dwelling in forms more minute than those discovered by the best microscopes of today? Tomorrow an instrument may be designed that will reach beyond all previous devices and show much of what is hidden today. The infinitude of space, of the great and of the small, seems to be beyond question and independent of our cognition. Investigating invisible worlds in looking over the marvelous achievements of physical science, there is one characteristic particularly worthwhile to note, namely, that each new discovery has been made through the invention of new or the improvement of previously existing devices to aid the senses, and for that reason the investigations of science have been limited to the world of sense, the dense physical world. Scientists have dealt with the chemical elements, solids, liquids, and gases, but beyond that they have no instruments capable of reaching, although forced to postulate a still finer matter they call ether. Because without this finer medium they find it impossible to account for light, electricity, etc. Thus we see that physical science inductively recognizes the existence of an invisible world as a necessity in the economy of nature. Both physical and occult science are therefore agreed on that point, and both reach into the invisible world for solutions to problems. They differ as to the method of investigation and the credence to be given evidence thus obtained. Material science seeks only for explanation to problems insoluble on a purely physical basis, such as the passage of light waves through a vacuum or the resemblance of the flowers of the present season to those of past summers. In such cases science readily postulates an invisible, intangible something like ether or heredity and prides itself on its acumen and the ingenuity of its explanations. Occult science asserts that there is an invisible cause at the root of all visible phenomena, which when known will afford a more thorough knowledge of the facts of life than a mechanical concept. And that the most comprehensive idea of life is obtained by the study of both the phenomena of the visible and the noumena or underlying causes of the invisible world. It therefore investigates the invisible worlds and offers a more thorough and reasonable solution to the problems of life than mere facts of science derived only through observation of the physical phenomena. Proving scientific hypotheses, material science postulates ether and heredity as solutions to the above problems, though unable to offer actual proof of the truth of its hypotheses except their seeming reasonableness. Yet when occult science employs similar methods and declares the existence of the spirit, its immorality, its pre-existence to birth, and persistence after death, its independence of the body, etc., physical science sneers and inconsistently speaks of superstition and ignorance. It demands proof, though the evidence offered is at least as good as the scientific evidence of the existence of ether, heredity, and numerous other ideas advanced by science. Implicitly believed in by the multitude that admiringly bows its head in the dust before any dictum supported by the magic word science. No one can demonstrate the truth of a proposition in geometry to a person unacquainted with the principles of mathematics. For similar reasons the facts of the inner worlds cannot be proved to the material scientist. If the person devoid of mathematical knowledge studies that science, he will be easily satisfied as to the solution of the problem. When the physical scientist has fitted himself for the apprehension of super-physical facts, he will have the proof and be compelled to uphold the very theories he now combats as superstition. This invisible world is inhabited by those whom we call dead, who are living there in full possession of all their mental and emotional faculties, living under conditions which make their life as real and profitable as ours, perhaps more so. It is further capable of proof that at least some of them take considerable interest in the affairs of the physical world. Suffice it to take two instances of worldwide fame: Joan of Arc. There is first the testimony of Jeanne d'Arc, the Maid of Orleans, to hearing voices which spoke to and directed her. Let us consider the story of her life and see if it does not bear the stamp of truth. Here we have a simple, pure, and unsophisticated peasant girl, scarcely more than a child, who had never been outside her native village before going upon her mission. She was extremely timid, afraid of disobeying her father. Yet the imperious voices drove her to brave his displeasure, and she set out to find the King of France. After much trouble but constantly guided by voices, she was finally granted an audience by the king. When she entered, the king stood in the midst of his courtiers, a puppet was seated on the throne, and everyone expected to see her discomfited, for she had never seen the king, but, guided by the faithful voices, Jean unhesitatingly walked up to him and saluted. She convinced him of the truth of her mission by whispering in his ear an exceedingly weighty secret known only to himself. In consequence of this proof, the command of the French army was taken out of the hands of the experienced generals, who had been defeated by the English at every turn, and placed in the hands of this child who knew nothing of warcraft herself, yet taught by her invisible prompters, led the French troops to victory. Her knowledge of military tactics was the constant wonder of her associates, and in itself a proof of the guidance she claimed. Next we see her imprisoned, subjected for years to threats or cajolery, as the mood of her cruel persecutors prompted, to induce her to acknowledge that there had been no voices, but the records of the proceedings of her different trials show in her answers a singleness of mind, an innocence and a straightforwardness unequaled in the annals of history, which confounded her judges at every turn. Not even death at the stake could make her abjure the truth as she knew it, and to this day her testimony to the guiding voices from the invisible world stands unshaken, sealed with her lifeblood. This martyr to truth has lately been canonized as saint by the Church which slew her. But, someone may say, while she was no doubt honest, she was but a simple peasant girl, unaware that she was suffering from hallucinations. Strange hallucinations which enabled her to unhesitatingly pick out the king she had never seen and tell him a secret unknown to any other person, to accurately describe battles while they were being fought many miles away. As afterwards verified by participants, Socrates. But let us pass on to our second witness, who is by no means of the simple-minded. In that respect Socrates is an absolute contrast to Jeanne d'Arc, for his was the keenest intellect, the greatest mind we know, unexcelled to the present day. He also sealed his testimony to the voice of guidance from the invisible world with his life-blood, and we may take it as a self-evident fact that it must have been an exceedingly intelligent voice, or it would never have been able to counsel so great a sage as Socrates. To hold that he was insane or suffering from hallucinations will hardly meet the case, for a man who, like Socrates, would weigh all other matters with such nicety, is above suspicion in that respect. And the more reasonable course is to acknowledge that there are more things in heaven and earth than we know individually or collectively, and then start to investigate. That is indeed what the most advanced people are doing in our day and age, realizing that it is just as foolish to be too skeptical to investigate as to be over-credulous and take for gospel truth everything we hear. Only by properly informing ourselves is it possible for us to arrive at a conclusion worthy of our manhood or womanhood, no matter whether we decide one way or the other. Testimony of a scientist recognizing this principle, and the signal importance of the subject. A Society for Psychical Research was formed more than a quarter of a century ago and numbers among its members some of the brightest minds of our time. They have spared no pains to sift truth from error in the many thousands of cases brought to their attention, and as a result we find that one of the most prominent scientists of our time, Sir Oliver Lodge, as president of the Society, gave to the world several years ago the statement that the existence of an invisible world, inhabited by the so-called dead, and their power to communicate with this world, had been established beyond peradventure in such an abundance of cases as to leave no room for doubt. Coming as that statement does, from one of the greatest of modern scientists, one who has brought to his psychic studies a mind sharpened by science, who was well protected against being duped in any way, such testimony should command the highest respect among all who are seeking for truth. There is no death, having thus submitted inductive, deductive, and direct evidence. We may add that the existence of another world, intangible to the five senses but readily investigated by means of a sixth sense, is a fact in nature, whether we recognize it or not, as light and color exist around blind and seeing alike. It is the blind man's loss that he cannot see the light and color all about him. It is ours if we are blind to the superphysical realms, but to all who will take the trouble to awaken their latent faculties, the opening of the proper sense is but a matter of time. When that time comes, we shall see that the so-called dead are all about us, and that in fact, there is no death. As John McCreary says in the following beautiful poem, there is no death. The stars go down to rise upon another shore, and bright in heaven's jeweled crown they shine forevermore. There is no death. The forest leaves convert to life the viewless air, the rocks disorganize to feed the hungry moss they bear. There is no death. The dust we tread shall change beneath the summer showers to golden grain or mellow fruit, or rainbow-tinted flowers. There is no death. The leaves may fall, the flowers may fade and pass away, they only wait through wintry hours the warm, sweet breath of May. There is no death, although we grieve when beautiful familiar forms that we have learned to love are torn from our embracing arms. Although with bowed and breaking heart, with sable garb and silent tread we bear their senseless dust to rest and say that they are dead, they are not dead. They have but passed. Beyond the mists that blind us here into the new and larger life of that serener sphere, they have but dropped their robe of clay to put a shining raiment on. They have not wandered far away, they are not lost, or gone, though unseen to the mortal eye. They still are here and love us yet, the dear ones they have left behind they never do forget. Sometimes upon our fevered brow we feel their touch, a breath of balm, our spirit sees them, and our hearts grow comforted and calm. Yes, ever near us, though unseen, our dear immortal spirits tread, for all God's boundless universe is life. There are no dead.